I took the job because it paid cash and asked very little of me, which at the time was exactly what I needed. I had just moved back to Ohio after a divorce that left me more tired than angry, and I was picking up overnight security work wherever I could find it. Warehouses, parking lots, construction sites, empty strip malls. Most of it was boring, and I liked it that way. The listing for this job came through a small private security company I had worked with before. The email was short. One sentence said the assignment was temporary. Another said the location was a single-family residence scheduled for demolition. There was no client name listed, which was unusual, but not unheard of. Sometimes banks or legal firms stayed anonymous. I called the number, confirmed my availability, and was told to report the next night at 9 p.m. I asked what exactly I was guarding. The woman on the phone said, "Just the structure." I asked if there had been vandalism or squatters. She said, "We don't want anyone inside overnight." That was all. The house was about 40 minutes outside the city, down a stretch of county road that ran through fields and patches of woods. No street lights, no neighbors close enough to see porch lights. It was the kind of place where people used to live before everything moved closer to town. When I pulled up, my headlights caught the front of the house, and my first thought was that it didn't look abandoned. The yard was overgrown, but not badly. The house itself was intact. No boarded windows, no graffiti, no caution tape. Just an old two-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and a porch that sagged slightly in the middle. I parked near the gravel driveway and got out. The air smelled like damp soil and old leaves. I walked the perimeter with a flashlight. All the windows were intact. The doors were locked. There was no power line running to the house, and no meter, no trash bins, no mailbox. I checked in with dispatch, logged my arrival, and settled into the routine. The instructions were simple. Stay on site from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Do not enter the house unless there is an emergency. Report any activity. The first night was quiet. I sat in my car for most of it, stepping out every hour to walk around the house. The wind moved through the trees. Animals rustled in the brush. Nothing felt off. What struck me, even that first night, was how normal everything felt for a place that supposedly had no owner. There were no signs posted, no foreclosure notices, no construction permits, just a house waiting for something. On the second night, I noticed something small. When I walked past the back door, my flashlight caught the faint smell of something warm. Not food, not smoke, just that smell you get when a space has been occupied recently. I checked the door. Still locked. No footprints in the dirt. I told myself it was nothing. By the fourth night, I realized the house wasn't as empty as it looked. Every morning when my shift ended, I did a final walk. On one of those mornings, I noticed the porch chair had shifted. It was subtle, but I was sure of it. I had leaned my elbow on the armrest earlier that night, and now it sat angled slightly toward the door. I called dispatch and reported possible movement. They logged it without concern. No one asked me to investigate further. Over the next week, these small changes continued. A window curtain that had been bunched to one side now hung straight. The back screen door creaked when it hadn't before. Dirt on the porch steps showed faint impressions that looked like shoe soles, but the ground around them was undisturbed. I never heard anyone. I never saw lights. I never saw a figure in the windows, but the house felt awake. I finally broke protocol on the 9th night. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound from inside. It wasn't loud. It sounded like a floorboard settling, followed by something heavier shifting weight. I stood on the porch and listened. The sound came again, closer to the front of the house. I radioed dispatch. There was a delay before they responded. When they did, they told me to remain outside and observe. I don't know why I unlocked the door. I tell myself now that I wanted to confirm no one was inside, so I could stop imagining things. The key was in a lockbox, which itself felt strange. No paperwork, no explanation, just a code. The door opened easily. The inside of the house was empty, but not abandoned. There was no furniture, but the floors were clean. The walls showed marks where pictures had been removed carefully. There were no cobwebs, no debris. The air inside was warmer than outside. I stood in the entryway and listened. The sound came again, from upstairs. Slow movement, deliberate. I called out, identifying myself. No response. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw something that made my stomach tighten. There were footprints in the dust along the hallway. Bare feet, adult-sized. They stopped at the end of the hall, in front of a closed door. I didn't open it. I backed away, locked the door behind me, and returned to my car. Dispatch told me to stay on site until morning. When my shift ended, I filed a full incident report. No one followed up. The next night, the house looked reset. No footprints, no warmth inside. The door was locked. The lockbox code still worked, but the sounds continued. Every night, always from inside, always when I was present. Then things started happening while I was awake and watching. One night, I watched the porch light turn on. There was no power line to the house. I reported immediately. Dispatch put me on hold. When they came back, they asked me to confirm the address. I did. They went quiet for a moment, then told me to remain calm and stay in my vehicle. When the porch light turned off, they told me the issue had been noted. I started asking questions after that. Who owned the house? Who ordered the security? When demolition was scheduled? No one had answers. Eventually, they stopped responding to those questions altogether. On my third week there, I found food inside the house. Not leftovers. Fresh groceries. Bread, milk, canned soup, all sitting neatly on the kitchen counter. I left immediately and refused to go back inside. The final night came without warning. I arrived at my shift and found the front door open. All the lights inside were on. I called dispatch. No response. I stood there for a long time, knowing I should leave, and knowing that if I did, I would never know what that place was. I went inside. The house was no longer empty. There were signs of living everywhere. A made bed, a running sink, a television playing quietly in the living room, and on the wall, near the front door, was a clipboard with a log sheet. My name was at the top. Every shift I had worked was written down. Times, notes, observations. The last entry read, "Guard arrived. Monitoring in progress." I quit that night. I never returned. The security company later told me the contract had been canceled weeks earlier. The house was demolished a month later. There was no record of who lived there, or who hired me, or why my name was already waiting inside. I did not believe in anything strange before this job, and even now, I don't think what happened fits into a neat category. I am not telling this to scare anyone. I am telling it because ignoring it nearly broke me, and because pretending it was normal felt worse than admitting it was not. I drove a school bus for a rural district in western Pennsylvania for almost 7 years. It was a small job in a small place, and nothing about it was dramatic. The roads were narrow, the houses were spaced far apart, and most mornings passed the same way. Kids half asleep, cold air, same turns, same stops, same faces. That routine is the reason I noticed when something did not belong. The unofficial stop was never on my route sheet. It was never printed. It was never discussed in training. I learned about it the same way I learned most things on that job, from the driver I replaced. His name was Doug. He had been driving the route for over a decade and was retiring. On my second day riding along with him, he slowed the bus near a long gravel stretch that led into woods. There was no house visible from the road, just trees and a mailbox leaning sideways. He stopped the bus. I looked at him and said, "This isn't on the list." He nodded like he expected that. "Just stop here," he said. "Open the door. Don't say anything." No kid came out that morning. He waited about 10 seconds, then closed the door and pulled away like nothing happened. When I asked him about it, he said, "Some mornings, someone gets on. Some mornings, no one does." I laughed, thinking he was messing with me. He didn't smile. He told me the stop had been there longer than he had. He told me the district knew about it. He told me not to bring it up unless someone else did first. That should have been enough to make me refuse the route. But when you work those kinds of jobs, you learn quickly that asking too many questions gets you replaced. I needed the paycheck. I told myself it was probably a special needs pickup or something outdated in the system. My first week alone, nothing happened. I stopped there each morning, opened the door, waited, then moved on. On the 6th morning, someone boarded. I noticed the kid immediately because he was already standing at the edge of the road when I slowed down. He didn't come from the woods. He didn't come down the gravel path. He was just there. He was a boy, maybe 12 or 13. Thin, clean clothes, backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't look sick or injured or upset. He didn't look lost. He stepped onto the bus without a word and sat in the seat directly behind me on the right side. He didn't look at the other kids. He didn't respond when a girl asked him if he was new. He just sat there, facing forward, hands in his lap. I checked the mirror more than once because something about him felt unfinished, like a detail my brain expected but couldn't find. At the school, he got off with the rest of them. I assumed that was the end of it. When I got back to the depot later that afternoon, I checked the attendance list. His name wasn't there. I checked the roster. Nothing. I asked the office assistant if there was a new student added late. She said no. I described him. She told me I was probably mistaken and suggested maybe a kid from another route hopped on. The next morning, he was there again. Same clothes, same backpack, same seat. This time, I paid closer attention. He didn't breathe heavily. He didn't fidget. He didn't react when the bus hit bumps or when kids yelled. He sat like someone waiting. Over the next 2 weeks, he boarded the bus 4 more times. Always the same way. Always the same seat. Never spoke. The kids started noticing. They asked me who he was. They asked why he never talked. One boy claimed the kid wasn't there one moment, and then suddenly was. I told them to stop making things up. What bothered me more than his silence was the way the school handled him. Every time he got off the bus, he walked toward the building like everyone else. But none of the teachers ever acknowledged him. No one stopped him. No one corrected him. It was as if he slipped between systems. I finally brought it up to the vice principal. She listened without interrupting. Then she told me, very calmly, not to worry about that stop anymore. She did not tell me to skip it. She told me to keep doing exactly what I had been doing. I asked her if the boy was enrolled. She said, "We don't track him." That was her exact wording. After that conversation, things escalated. One morning, the boy was already sitting in his seat when I opened the door at the stop. I know this for a fact because I checked the mirror before pulling up, and he was not there. And then suddenly he was. I slammed the brakes and shouted for everyone to stay seated. My heart was pounding. The kids thought I was yelling at them. The boy did not react. I pulled over after dropping the kids off and threw up on the side of the road. The next week, I found something on the bus after my route. A folded piece of paper tucked between the seat cushions where the boy sat. It was a drawing, crude, pencil on lined paper. It showed a bus on a road with trees on both sides. There was a stick figure behind the wheel. The face had my glasses. Behind the bus, drawn smaller, with a shape that looked like the woods swallowing the road. No name, no date. I reported it. The depot manager told me I needed to take time off if I was feeling stressed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how the boy never appeared in the afternoon. He only rode in the mornings. He never got back on the bus to go home. The next morning, I did something I should not have done. After dropping the kids off, I drove back to the gravel road. There was no house. The mailbox had no name. The gravel path ended after about 50 feet and disappeared into trees. I walked it anyway. About 20 yards in, I found a clearing. There was a small stone marker half buried in the ground. No headstone, no flowers, just a flat slab with a name carved into it. It was the boy's name. I recognized it immediately, even though I had never heard it spoken. There was a date underneath. Over 20 years old. I stood there longer than I should have, then went back to the bus and drove away. The next morning, the boy boarded one last time. He looked different. Not injured, not decayed, just tired. When we reached the school, he stood at the front of the bus and looked at me for the first time. His eyes were clear, focused. He nodded once. Then he stepped off and walked away from the building, toward the trees behind the playground. No one else noticed. I never saw him again. The stop was removed from my route sheet the following semester without explanation. Doug passed away the next year. I never got to ask him what he knew. I still drive past that road sometimes. The mailbox is gone now. The woods look the same. I do not stop. My uncle lived alone for most of his adult life. He worked a basic maintenance job for the city, never married, never had children, and kept very little contact with extended family. When he died, it took almost 3 weeks before anyone noticed. A neighbor complained about a smell, and the police traced it back to his apartment. I was the closest living relative, which is how I ended up dealing with his things. The apartment was in a low-rise brick building outside Milwaukee. Not dangerous, not nice either. The kind of place where people nodded, but did not talk. I had been inside only once before, years earlier, and even then it felt overly controlled, like everything had been placed with intention. After the funeral, I decided to move in temporarily. I was between leases, and it made sense financially. The landlord was eager to fill the unit again and offered reduced rent if I took it as is. The first few days were uneventful. I cleaned. I boxed up his clothes. I threw out expired food. What struck me was how repetitive everything was. Every cupboard held identical items. Every drawer was arranged the same way. His calendar on the wall showed the same handwritten schedule repeated week after week. Wake at 5:40 a.m. Shower, coffee, walk, work, dinner at 6:30. Lights off at 10:15. No variation, no notes, no reminders. The neighbors noticed me immediately. That was the first thing that unsettled me. The woman across the hall stopped me on my second day and said, "You're back early today." I told her I had just moved in. She looked confused, then laughed it off and said I reminded her of him. That happened again and again. People greeted me by his name. They commented on things I had not done yet. One man asked if I was feeling better after last week. When I told him he had the wrong person, he apologized but looked unconvinced. I told myself it was just resemblance and coincidence. Then the notes started appearing. The first one was on the kitchen table when I came home from work. Just a small slip of paper with handwriting I recognized instantly. Dinner at 6:30. I assumed I had left it there myself without realizing. That explanation worked until I found the next one taped to the bathroom mirror. Don't skip the walk. The walk was something my uncle did every evening, around the same time, always the same route. Neighbors had already commented that they hadn't seen me walking yet. I ignored the notes for a few days. I did not follow the routine. I stayed up late. I ate when I felt like it. Nothing dramatic happened. Then I started sleeping poorly. Every night, I woke up around the same time, 3:12 a.m. Always. No noise, no dreams. Just awake, with the feeling that something had been interrupted. One morning, I found my shoes by the door. I was certain I had left them in the bedroom. Later that week, I noticed the calendar had been updated. My handwriting was on it. The same routine, same times, same structure. Only this time, the dates were current. I checked my phone. There was no record of me writing it. No memory of doing it. I started keeping the bedroom door locked at night. That didn't stop things from changing. Objects moved back into their original places. The couch cushions aligned the way my uncle preferred. The thermostat adjusted itself. The lights went off at 10:15, even when I stayed awake. The neighbors stopped confusing me for him. They started treating me as him. They commented on how nice it was to see me back to my old habits. One woman said she was glad I stopped acting strange again. I found the notebooks after about a month. They were hidden behind a loose panel in the bedroom closet. Dozens of them, all filled. Dates going back years. At first, I thought they were diaries. They were not. They were records. Each notebook documented the same day, over and over, with minor changes noted, deviations tracked, consequences observed. He had been experimenting with something. When he followed the routine exactly, nothing happened. When he skipped steps, things escalated. Noise complaints that were never made. People entering his apartment without memory of it. Objects missing, then returned. Periods of time unaccounted for. He believed the apartment required consistency. He believed something in the building responded to repetition. The final notebooks were harder to read. The writing grew cramped. Urgent. Routine is not preference. It is agreement. Deviation noticed. Replacement is easier than correction. The last entry was dated the day before his death. Body failing. Routine incomplete. Risk increasing. I stopped sleeping in the apartment after that. I stayed with a friend and returned during the day to pack. The last day I went back, the calendar had been updated again. Wake at 5:40 a.m. Shower. Coffee. Walk. Work. Dinner at 6:30. Lights off at 10:15. Underneath, in smaller writing, occupant adjusted. I moved out that afternoon and never returned. The landlord called weeks later to ask why I hadn't been following the lease terms. He said the neighbors complained I was still there, but refusing to answer the door. The apartment is occupied now. Sometimes, when I pass that building, I see someone walking in the evening at the same time my uncle used to. He walks the same route. He does not look up.